Today is Thursday, March 15th. At the Flint Memorial Library Activity Room, we have a conversation with Karen Vitale and Nancy Parsons. 3 p.m. The two will discuss Karen Vitale's young adult novel, My Grandmother Talks to Herself in the Mirror, but it's no reflection on me.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is a lovely afternoon to have a program, and we're thrilled that Karen Vitale is going to be talking about her new book, young adult novel, with Nancy Parsons. And we've had some of these afternoons before. They're very nice. It's a nice conversation about book and about writing, and we're very grateful to the friends for helping organize it, providing the refreshments and this atmosphere. And I'm just going to talk for a minute about some upcoming programs. You know, today's program is part of North Reading Reads 2012, and we have one more main program. We've got a panel discussion on Tuesday, March 22nd. These 3 people talking about food and community, including sustainable agriculture, local food, farmers markets. And then there's going to be 2 programs for young people related to North Reading Reads. One is on the 22nd, 4 o'clock, about planting seeds for 3 to 6-year-olds, and then one for older to young teens on Tuesday the 27th at 3:30. And we're going to make beautiful paper flowers. Emma Weiler, our new youth services librarian, is going to demonstrate that, and she's really very creative. On April 10th, we're going to have a speaker talk about Kiva Systems, the robotics company in North Reading. It's very exciting, new high-tech company that is in warehouse automation. And then on April 17th, Nancy Bailey Miller is going to read her poetry, and she's going to do a poetry workshop on the 19th, again an afternoon program. For those of you who like afternoon, you might find us at 2 o'clock. And the book discussion in April is going to focus on poetry. That's on the 3rd of April. And then in May, Suzanne Korn is going to talk about the folk art of Moses Eaton Jr. and Rufus Porter. She does vintage stenciling. She's an expert, and she's also an artist herself, and she's from North Reading. So thank you very much. We look forward to Karen and Nancy conversation. Thank you.
Well, I'm delighted to be here because I really enjoy these conversations with authors. I've been lucky enough to do a couple of them. You haven't yet, but I have. I know that they're fun and very informal, very comfortable. This is what we're going to do. Karen and I will have a conversation for a while, and you can join us if you want, or if you are shy about just butting into a conversation, because it's really between all of us, you can wait until afterward and ask a question or something. So you will have lots of opportunity to talk with the author. And after we've talked ourselves out, Karen is going to read excerpts from her book. And finally, you will have an opportunity to buy a book if you haven't done so, and I know a lot of you already have, but perhaps if you have a book and it isn't signed, I know Karen would be pleased to sign it for you. So, here we go. Now, Karen, would you like to share what inspired you to write this book?
Yes, my grandmother lived with us when I was growing up, and she had Alzheimer's, and my grandma and I were very close. My dad said that when I was born, my mother had already had 3 boys, but they lost one at 6 months old to leukemia. But when I was born, he told my grandma that it was a girl, and my grandma fainted. And he said from that time on we were inseparable. And I was kind of my grandma's shadow growing up. I followed her everywhere. And then when I was older, in my teens, and she had Alzheimer's, she became my shadow.
Well, In what ways would you say the story is autobiographical? In what ways might it be, and in what ways isn't it?
It's, I would say, semi-autobiographical because everything that happened to Maggie Ryan's grandmother in this story happened to my grandmother. My grandmother was brought home by the police more than once. She used to wear 2 or 3 dresses at a time. She would adorn her sweaters with pencils and spoons and knives in the buttonholes. She used to talk to herself in the mirror, and she always asked, "Where are the folks? When are you taking me home?"
In what ways, though, would you say that Maggie's story differs from yours?
Well, my story took place in the 1960s with my grandmother. Her story would be more current. I had 4 brothers, 2 older, 2 younger. Maggie has 2 brothers. Her parents are divorced, mine weren't. And I grew up in Michigan, not out here.
Some of the people have read the book, I know, but some have not. So would you be able to summarize the plot a little bit for us, talk about what it's...
This story was written in journal form, and it spans about 6 months of a young teenager's life. Her name is Maggie Ryan, and she hates change of all sorts. And it seems like change is going on around her. Her parents were divorced about a year ago, and her parents are now have new relationships, and she's not very happy with that. She's leaving the comfort of middle school and going into the unknown of high school in the fall. But most of all, she's upset about the strange and erratic behavior of her grandmother, which later turns out to be Alzheimer's disease. So Maggie writes down all her angst, her joys, her fears in her journal to try to make some kind of sense out of all the change that's going on around her.
Was that journal technique easy to write? Well, maybe nothing's easy to write, but did you find that you were comfortable with the journal format of the book, of telling the story?
Yeah, I kind of wanted the reader to hear Maggie's voice and to bring an immediacy to the story. I always like to read journals and letters and diaries. I'm kind of nosy that way. And I've kept journals throughout my life, kind of sporadically, so I found that was an easy format to use.
Mm-hmm. How many of you keep journals? The poet raises her hand. I do. Anyway, I think it's comfortable to read as well. You've written about a very timely subject. We are hearing a lot about Alzheimer's now, but you've also taken it to the stage where young people can be involved in it, and I think that's a very interesting take on the Alzheimer's story. I wonder, what reaction have you had from people who, specifically about the Alzheimer's issue in the book?
It seems like you read about it all the time. They're saying it's a national epidemic and the sixth or causing deaths of people. I forget your question.
No. I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I do that. I'm sure it's no reflection on you. I forgot you.
People say it to me.
What are people saying to you? Help us out here,
Just
guys.
saying that, I think it's timely.
Well, a lot of people who have read the book or talked to me about it, it seems like everyone knows someone who has Alzheimer's, a parent, a grandparent, and it seems like a lot of the time the burden falls on the adult child to have to take care of the situation. Sometimes the parent, a spouse, their father or mother, whichever one doesn't have Alzheimer's, sometimes the other spouse kind of puts her head in the sand or says it's not as serious as it is. And so the adult child oftentimes has to get medical or financial help for the parents. A couple of times I've heard of people having to move their parent out of a home into a assisted living situation. It's kind of heartbreaking for everyone involved.
Yeah. One of the things that Maggie copes with is watching the adults, namely her mother, deal with Grandma, and maybe not as sensitively as Maggie would like. Is that true? I think that one of the things that happens in fiction, and perhaps it has to happen, is that characters grow or change. And would you agree with that?
Yes. And I think just for character development, they have to change, and to make a story interesting, there seems to need some change throughout the story.
And this journal goes from when to when?
I think it's May to December, or maybe February. I can't. February.
Both of us should know without having to look. That's not really a very long time for someone to change, but maybe a young person can. And in what ways did Maggie evolve and maybe mature over those months?
At one point in the journal, Maggie says, why do things have to change? Why can't things just stay the same? Meanwhile, everything in her life is changing. But she has a sort of a nemesis, Joey, who's in her class and a neighbor. And she doesn't like him at all. But when they get to high school, they're both on the writing on the school newspaper. And she finds out that his grandfather also has Alzheimer's, so the love of writing and a shared grandparent with Alzheimer's brings them closer, and there's sort of a little bit of a romance going on. But she changes with Joey, and she changes her feelings towards high school because it isn't as scary once she gets there. And once she gets to know her parents' new relationship, her father's girlfriend, her mother's boyfriend, she begins to accept them and even like them. And as to her grandmother, she realizes that her grandmother is going to change and it's not going to be for the better. So she just takes it one day at a time. And as Maggie begins to accept some of the changes going around her, she even embraces some of them.
Let's talk a little bit about the process of the book. I'm not sure when you wrote this, but it was a while before it became a book.
Just to give you an idea, the first draft was written in stone. It was carved in stone. It's been around a while. I had it in my drawer for a long time and sent it out once in a while to an independent publisher or sometimes a writing contest, and I have the rejection slips to prove all this. But about a year and a half ago, Nancy asked some of the friends of the library to proofread a book that she was putting together, memoirs of POWs. It was Brothers of War, and it was a great book. And so we started talking, and Nancy said that she deals with memoirs and writes memoirs. And so I told her